Hi, everyone. It's Tuesday, August 5th. I'm Benit Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom, and here are your top stories this afternoon. Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney just announced a series of new measures to help the softwood lumber industry, some of which will benefit BC. So Carney is promising up to $700 million in loan guarantees to help companies get competitive financing, and will also make $500 million available in grants to help producers create new products and find new markets outside of the U.S. He says 90% of Canadian lumber exports go to the United States, and that leaves the sector at the whim of President Donald Trump's duties and tariffs.
Canada is a vital supplier to our southern neighbor. We represent around a quarter of the U.S. market, and we help keep down costs of American homes while improving their quality. But we're in a situation now where the disputes around softwood lumber are part of a bigger picture. American trade pressures have intensified and broadened.
The federal government will also provide $50 million for upskilling, reskilling, and income supports for more than 6,000 affected softwood lumber workers. And let's get to your BC wildfire update. So overall, there are now 134 fires that are burning, with 18 new fires that were discovered yesterday. But the cooler weather we are seeing should offer some reprieve this week. One wildfire of note is that Wesley Ridge wildfire on Vancouver Island. It's grown to more than 500 hectares. 387 properties are on evacuation order. And as hundreds remain out of their homes, surrounding communities are offering a helping hand.
It is hard on everyone. People are sleeping in campers. People are sleeping in tents. The evacuation has happened. So it is difficult, but you can see that the spirit is still there. Everyone is trying to help. We have a Facebook group that they are all trying to help, from all the way from Comox to Nanaimo. Everybody's coming together, the whole community, to help in any way they can.
Samir just had his tiny home delivered to Qualicum 2 weeks ago. He had to leave it behind with that evacuation order, but then a local helped tow his home out of that evacuation area, and that is something that Amir says he is forever grateful for. Meanwhile, 2 wildfires in north central BC have led to evacuation alerts and orders. The Sam Ross Creek wildfire has led to just under 300 properties being put on evacuation alert on Monday. That fire is still out of control at around 7 hectares. Then there's also the Dorman Lake wildfire. That one's south of Fraser Lake. It's led to 10 properties being put on evacuation order. Now, both of those fires, they are suspected to be caused by lightning. And the summer tourism season is in full swing, and we've got about 1 month left to go until it's back to school. Just how much is elbows up nationalism affecting our local tourism economy? Well, the CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of BC says after seeing a dip in tourism the first 6 months of the year, those numbers are going back up.
Lots of people coming from other provinces, including Alberta and Ontario, but we tend to get that a lot in the Kootenays and the Okanagan, where we see mostly domestic visitation. But anecdotally, we are hearing that people are choosing to stay within Canada, even within British Columbia, to experience their own province this year, as opposed to going stateside or overseas.
He says BC is starting to see more American tourists visit our province again, despite the ongoing tariff dispute. That's what we have for you so far. I'm Benit Brach. Stay with us. BC Today is coming up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Hey, remember when Alberta was calling? A number of British Columbians did answer and move next door, but now a BC business group says it knows what's needed to improve for you to stay right where you are. We'll talk to the BC Business Council and we'll ask you what's making you consider leaving BC and what would keep you here. That's on the open line. Plus, the Prime Minister has announced more than $1 billion for the softwood lumber industry to pivot away from the U.S. market. We'll get reaction from a forestry union. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well. And you can call us now on our top story. What is making you consider leaving BC? And what would make you want to stay? You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 604-669-3733 or 1-800-825-5950. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Well, the BC Business Council wants you to stay right here in BC in case you were considering leaving. When Alberta launched its Alberta is Calling ad campaign, the group launched its own Stay With B.C. campaign in response, and it asked people what would make them want to stay here. And they heard from 3,000 people about improvements they wanted to see to housing and affordability, jobs and wages, taxes and regulation, and public services like healthcare and transportation. And Laura Jones joins me now, the CEO of the BC Business Council. Thanks so much for coming into the studio.
Well, thanks for having me, Michelle.
Well, what exactly do we know about how many British Columbians are leaving the province?
So we know that they're leaving in numbers that we haven't seen since the 1990s. So overall, we had about 70,000 people leave. Now, that's not net. That's the number of people leaving. BC is often a popular place to live and come, but we're seeing fewer people come. So that's a little bit below average. It's like 55,000, and typically it's more like 62,000 a year. So we're seeing fewer people come, and we're seeing more people leave the province.
Yeah, that's a good point that you make because although people left, there was net increase in population because of immigration to BC.
Yeah, that's right. And what we're talking about when we talk about people leaving is we're talking about interprovincially. Yes. So our population is increasing, you're quite right, because we've got a lot of international immigration. And those numbers have been higher than historical averages by quite a bit. So it's confusing, right? Because the population is growing. And yet what we're seeing is between provinces, more people are choosing to leave BC than they are to come to BC, which suggests to us that they're not finding the kind of opportunity here that they would like to find. And thus we launched our campaign, which is really about advancing the policy changes that we need in order to make it possible for people to stay. But we wanted to use a little bit of humor and to riff off the Alberta's Calling campaign that many people are so familiar with.
Well, we'll get to what's needed in a moment, but what is the impact of British Columbians leaving for other provinces?
So, what we heard when we reached out to people and to hear their story, because we know what the data is showing. The data is showing people are leaving. The data is showing that there are a lot of economic indicators that are flashing red. And so we can look at the ones that economists typically look at, like GDP per capita, where we're actually shrinking in the past couple of years. That's really not good news. That's like, on per capita terms, we're in a recession in BC. We can look at the record-breaking deficits, which suggest the revenues are lower than they need to be for governments to pay for services like healthcare and education. And of course, that affects lots of people too, public sector. A lot of public sector folks are now looking for increases. Well, when the revenues are down, that makes that harder. So that affects us in all kinds of ways, from not having access to a doctor to not being able to be as generous maybe with the public sector wage increases. And then you see it in numbers like food bank visits, 80% increase over the past 5 years. So it really is hitting people. You're also seeing it in youth unemployment numbers. So a lot of people university students came home, they had a harder time finding jobs. I know my daughter was one of those. So we're seeing it right across the board in the economic kind of indicators flashing red.
And so who did you hear from? Can you tell me a bit about what were the stories that they told you?
It was so interesting because, of course, you know, Michelle, when you ask people to engage in a campaign, you're asking them to do more than just nod their head to something they're hearing on the radio or TV. They had to scan a QR code or take the initiative to send an email or make a phone call. And we heard from over 3,000 British Columbians. This is a fairly short campaign from every corner of the province. So not just Vancouver and Surrey, but the village of Clinton, population 600, we got responses from. So it really hit, I think, a conversation people want to have. They are having it at their dinner tables, and they want to have it in a broader forum. And then ultimately, I think they want our politicians to be having it at the cabinet tables.
Let's take a call now, asking you what is making you consider leaving British Columbia. What would make you want to stay? Our number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or hit pound 690 on your phone. Easy that way. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or just comment on our TikTok Live. We are live on TikTok as well as YouTube. Just search for CBC British Columbia there. Mike is joining us from Salmon Arm. Hi, Mike. Welcome. What are your thoughts about leaving British Columbia? Is that something you've been considering?
I have been considering. Really, it's the politics that has got me seriously looking at leaving and going to Alberta.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
As a parent, I don't have a lot of control over what's taught to my child. You're allowed to transition children without parents' knowledge.
So hold on, you're getting into LGBTQ rights now, right? And that's the parents
Correct.
are involved and are aware of what their children are pursuing and what they are learning in school.
Yes.
So what are you exactly concerned about when it comes to politics?
Well, I would say the legislation that David Eby has put forth that is gagging doctors and lawyers.
What legislation is that?
I don't have that information. I knew I should have had it before I stated,
Okay.
but you're not allowed. Lawyers are not allowed to challenge the government legally. You don't have that legal right anymore.
I'm okay. Since you don't have the facts to back that up, I'm gonna put you on hold, Mike. But talking about politics, he's obviously got some of the background incorrect there or missing. But when it comes to the politics in British Columbia and what's causing people to leave, is that a factor that came up in your research?
We're a nonpartisan organization, and we want to work with whoever is in power. But what I would say is a factor in our, and obviously we're focused on the economic part of this conversation, not on the some of the social side of it that the caller raised, that Mike raised. But what I would say I think is important is that one of the things we want to do is people have, I think, more agency than they think in these conversations. We wanted to create a space for people to have this conversation about the economy. And my favorite Dalai Lama quote is, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. And so I think that these concerns, one of the things that we heard in the campaign was, thank you for giving us a forum, for voicing these concerns, that people want to have a place to talk about their concerns for their kids. And we heard from young people, we heard from people who are retirement age but can't afford to retire because they have to keep working in order to pay their bills, and everything in between. Nurses who would like to stay but can't stay because they can't afford it. We heard from all kinds of people from all walks of life in the campaign.
And let's talk about housing, because that came up as a top concern for people who responded. I'm wondering if that has eased somewhat, because we have heard that the condo market has slowed down, that rents are decreasing somewhat, perhaps not enough just yet for people who would like to rent or move or purchase a home. Do you see that improving?
Well, one of the things we want to do with housing is connect it to the importance of opportunity and a strong economy. So before we launched this campaign in December, and the talk that was really the people were preoccupied preoccupied with affordability. Housing, prices in the supermarket have gone up about 30% in the last number of years, and that's hard to afford. But what we want to connect it to is the importance of having the opportunities and a strong economy, because if your wages can keep up with those increases, then of course that's helpful. Now, so part of what we're seeing in housing is the economy is slowing down, and of course that will mean that housing prices, but that has other implication if you can't find a job. So that's probably not quite the way we want to do it, but of course it's complicated. So yeah.
It is complicated, and because of that, we see builders, the Globe and Mail reporting that builders groups have written to the Premier and the Prime Minister saying we would need to see a softening of the limits on foreign investment in BC in order to ramp up, construction and get builders working again. So it is complicated. What are ways then to make housing more affordable that doesn't mean a big slowdown in the housing market?
Well, I think often people zoom into the specifics, and we need to actually zoom out a little bit. I'll zoom in a minute to some of the specifics, but I think we need to zoom out that a strong economy is what we need. And so when the economy is shrinking, that is not going to be good for people in construction who are building condos or housing. And that's what we have in per capita terms in British Columbia right now. Our economy is shrinking. Our economy is not in good shape. So we have to create the conditions where we've got a growing economy. And that requires making sure that we have a province where it is attractive to build and grow businesses. And that's where we really need to put a lot of our attention. Now, in terms of the specifics in construction, because I know we've got a lot of members in that sector, and they're hugely concerned about what's going on. And part of their challenge is that some of the indicators are lagging indicators. So things sort of look okay in the economic data, but they're not okay when you look at, what kinds of new things are coming on stream.
Whether people are working. Yeah.
So they've got some very legitimate and big concerns. I think every level of government needs to lean into this. So when we look at municipalities, when we look at Metro Vancouver, for example, we need to look at things like development cost charges, which is just, in some cases, are just ridiculous, and timeframes that have gotten way out of control. So one of the things we heard from citizens across the province actually was about red tape and about lengthy delays and taking a really long time to get to an answer. That answer doesn't always have to be yes, but the slow maybe just kills us.
I know you talked about other things as well in your report, but let's take some more calls and emails here now. Our numbers, again, love to hear from you. In light of this campaign to keep you here in BC, Stay With BC campaign, we're asking you, what is making you consider leaving the province, and what would make you want to stay? We've heard about housing, transportation, taxes and regulation, jobs and wages, healthcare and public transit as well. So what do you think needs to improve that would make you want to stay in BC or not consider leaving? And drop that idea. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or hit pound 690 on your phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca or comment on our TikTok Live. Lots of emails are coming in. And this one is from Leela in Victoria. I would never leave Victoria. I've been here for 20 years. I've lived in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Manitoba, and now here. The climate is such an attraction. Yeah, there's that. And the farmers markets, the hiking, is it perfect? No, but where is? When I first moved here, it was cheaper to rent an apartment than in other provinces due to not having a huge heating bill here, but now rent is atrocious. And if I had to move to another rental, I don't know what I would do. Leela, thank you very much. The weather sure is something that keeps people from leaving the province. Christina writes from Surrey. When I got a job offer in 2018, I was over the moon and never imagined I would want to move back to Nova Scotia. However, I still have no family doctor. Home prices have only gone up and rent is so high that I have little left for food or clothing or transportation. Traffic is crazy, and I'm constantly afraid of becoming a victim in a random attack. Also, people here are anything but welcoming to immigrants who speak with a noticeable accent, and I still feel like a tourist and not a resident. Oh dear. Okay, so by now I'm counting years until I can retire and move back to the much friendlier Nova Scotia. And that's from Christina in Surrey. I'm sorry to hear that, Christina. And so, I mean, a lot there, right? We've two people talking about rent, and you've talked about housing. So this is not even Alberta. These are two people who talked about Nova Scotia. So have you heard about that as well, other provinces?
Yeah, I mean, other provinces come up in the mix. The vast majority of people who leave British Columbia leave either for Alberta or Ontario, with about half going to Alberta, where the per capita average income in Alberta is over $20,000 more than British Columbia, just to sort of underscore how. And if you look at Washington State, it's like $46,000 more. So we heard from people about healthcare. Certainly, a lot of people, and in fact, we heard from people who one woman who moved here from the EU she's cleaning houses right now. It's going to take 3 years for her to get her nursing requirements, even though she was nursing in the EU. So all kinds of problems like that. We know 1 in 5 British Columbians don't have a family doctor. And the thing is, without a strong economy, it makes hiring more healthcare workers difficult. It makes paying them good wages difficult. So all of those things compound without that strong economy. As the Premier of Manitoba likes to say, the economy is the horse that pulls the social cart.
And I know you want to talk about that overall, strong economy, but at the same time, if you look at healthcare, there have been efforts to reduce the red tape and bureaucracy for foreign nurses and foreign trained nurses and doctors and healthcare workers who want to work here. So when it comes to healthcare, there's the economy, but there are also more targeted measures that the province has put in place. Does that make a difference?
It absolutely does, but I guess what we're saying is there needs to be a really concerted effort on this. And I know the province has done some good work, particularly with recognizing foreign credentials in the healthcare sector. They're also doing some good work in trying to reduce red tape in various specific areas. And we're just going to have to be very, very committed to that over a long period of time, because we didn't get to where we are today overnight, and it's not going to be, there's no magic bullets here. I do want to say that I think that one of the things we need to, that it's important that our senior political leaders do, and so both Premier Eby and the Prime Minister need to send that message that Canada is open for business. And it was great to see Premier Eby up in Kitimat celebrating the first shipment of LNG to Asia, because that may seem far away from the Lower Mainland and far away from some parts of the province, but we have to remember those are huge projects, and they generate a lot, whether it's technical consulting or other things that happen in the Lower Mainland. And then when there are good jobs there, you're going out more to restaurants and supporting local retail. So those projects are important to the entire province, and I think it's great to see the Premier out clearly supporting them.
A lot of measures or steps made, efforts on the part of the province as well as the federal government when it comes to projects like LNG and fast tracking those resource major projects. Some opposition to that, as we know, to Bills 14 and 15. We're going to hear that right now from James at Spence's Bridge, who I think wants to comment on that as well. Hi, James.
Oh, hello. My comment was actually a lot of people I've met have not or cannot breathe well in this province. Climate change is causing a lot of problems in BC, economically and for the air quality. And people who have difficulty breathing or want to extend their lives are getting out and going somewhere where there's cleaner air. The effects of climate change on the economy here is unbelievable. I would assume that's affecting the debt position in the NDP government here, and the effects on the environment. People can't go up where the fires have happened. In some parts of BC, people are not allowed to go in the bush now to go hunting and stuff. So it's having a real negative impact on the lifestyle of people. All these fires, the climate change, the floods, businesses are sometimes closed down for a week or two or more. It's hard on the economy, hard on the people, and there's certainly easier places to live.
Yeah. James, and so what are some ways then to address that? Because that is the concern as you raise, that is affecting quality of life in the province. But at the same time, you have these economic concerns, record deficit, and the BC government is trying to address the challenges from the tariffs, for example, by trying to push forward these resource projects. So how do you address those two seemingly competing concerns then?
Well, I think the government's going to be pushing more resource projects, especially in the north. More oil and gas development, more mining, in order to make up for lost revenues from the forestry sector and businesses that are being closed because of floods and fires and such. It's a difficult situation. It comes down to what are you best at doing that? And I think mining is one of those things now, unfortunately. I know a fellow, he's got his house all on solar, works well, but when the fire smoke comes in, he can't produce power. And this is a negative, huge negative impact on a lot of people. I don't have all the solutions. So.
Yeah, you have certainly raised some good points, though, and fodder for conversation. James, thank you so much for the call. That is James at Spence's Bridge. And we're going to continue to take more of your calls, lots of calls on the line, and lots of emails coming in as well, as we ask you, what is making you consider leaving BC, and what would make you want to stay? Perhaps the more important question that Laura wants to ask. Our numbers, again, 604-669-3733 or 1-800-825-5950. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email, again, bctoday@cbc.ca, and our TikTok live is up and taking your comments there. Marie writes, it's ironic that I'm viewing this at the point I am considering moving to BC because of the nature and the lifestyle, the values, beauty, and energy of the place. Thank you. Deb writes, Alberta is a way better place to live. If you like beauty and nature, check it out. I think that's a back and forth there. Thanks so much for your comments, and we'll be back with more of your calls and Laura Jones in just a moment. Right now, to other news, in honor of BC, the Order of BC Awards were announced actually yesterday. 15 British Columbians are recognized for their contributions to the province and beyond. One of those recipients is Chief Robert Louis of the West Bank First Nation, who was awarded for his leadership in Indigenous self-governance and economic development. The province says he has set a national standard for community empowerment and prosperity. And CBC spoke to him following the honor, and he made his excitement clear.
It's the highest honor that can be bestowed on citizens here in British Columbia. So for me, it's just a privilege and just an overwhelming feeling of emotion and gratitude and humbleness that that reflects the importance of what this award represents. And I work with First Nations throughout Canada, from Vancouver Island right through to Newfoundland, to assist them in self-governance. And I've seen some remarkable achievements. We have about 1/3 of all of the First Nations in Canada who are in the self-government mode, either operational or developmental, or are waiting to be added to the role to commence their discussions with Canada and each of the provinces to assume that jurisdiction. So I've seen some remarkable changes in the economic base of First Nations in Canada. And it is really perpetuated by self-governance and having jurisdictional authority. So that's been a good part of my life's work.
12:30 now. You're back with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, live streaming as well on CBC Gem, YouTube, TikTok. We are taking your calls asking you what would make you want to stay in British Columbia, despite the challenges that have been raised in this report that we're talking about from the BC Business Council, and asking you as well, what is making you consider leaving the province? Getting lots of emails. Travis wrote us, the people are leaving BC. That is the unsurprising outcome of our policy choices. We have had children and never built the homes for them to stay in. My parents' neighborhood remains exclusively set aside for single-family homes only. The neighborhood ages and people have had to move elsewhere. Why would we expect anything else to happen? If we want people to stay, we need to plan ahead and build homes for everyone, everywhere, and end exclusive neighborhoods frozen from any and all change. Travis, thank you for the email on housing there. BC Today at cbc.ca is our email address once again. And we'll be back to talk about this along with our guest, the CEO of the Business Council of BC, Laura Jones, coming up. And at about 12:45 or so, we'll get reaction to that announcement from the Prime Minister with grants and loan guarantees for the softwood lumber industry in the face of the U.S. duties and tariffs. So lots more coming your way here on BC Today. Right now, it's time for a CBC News Update. And here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Cooler weather this week could help firefighters around BC as they deal with out-of-control fires. Thousands of lightning strikes in recent days have sparked several new wildfires. The BC Wildfire Service says there are now more than 130 burning around the province, with 18 new fires in the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Mark Carney is promising more support for the BC lumber industry in response to U.S. duties and tariffs. Carney says up to $700 million in loan guarantees will be available to help companies get competitive financing. He's also committing $500 million in grants to help producers create new products and find new markets. And police say they issued more than 800 tickets, including more than 80 drug-impaired offenses during the Shambhala Music Festival in Salmo last month. Other offenses included excessive speeding, no insurance, and driving a mechanically unsound vehicle. The Highway Patrol says officers were particularly concerned about getting impaired drivers and unsafe vehicles off the road. And now the forecast on the north coast. Periods of rain this afternoon with a high of 17. Highs up to 25 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly cloudy with a high of 22. Highs getting up to 27 with some local smoke and sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, highs in the mid-20s with local smoke and sunshine. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly cloudy this afternoon with highs around 21. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. On all the platforms. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks for being with us. And we have been talking to the BC Business Council. They heard from 3,000 British Columbians for their Stay With BC campaign in the face of migration out of BC to other provinces, most dominantly Alberta. And so we've been asking you, what is making you consider leaving British Columbia and what would make you want to stay? Again, just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca or comment on our TikTok Live. And let's go to Pete now in Vancouver. Hi, Pete. What are your thoughts on what pushes people to leave the province?
Hi. I think a huge part is housing. And one thing that people aren't talking about housing is that we need to disincentivize politicians, left, right, and center, at all three levels of government, federal, provincial, and civic, from being corrupted by real estate. And I would encourage all of your listeners to Google a site called the Maple and landlord MPs. And this is from last election. I don't know if they have the data from this election, where they showed that Pierre Poilievre, who's a domestic real estate speculator and a landlord, Justin Trudeau is a domestic real estate speculator, and 39% of Liberal MPs, 46% of Conservatives, and 16% of NDPs were either domestic real estate speculators or landlords. So they have a vested interest in cranking up the housing prices so they can get richer. So they do things like, hey, let's let in 1 million international students. Let's let them buy housing. Let's get temporary foreign workers to sort of, increase the numbers. And
do you see that?
We need to make it illegal to do that.
Okay, and there is transparency, right, when it comes to politicians and potential conflicts of interest. But do you see that as the reason for housing really having become unaffordable? Like, are there other factors, do you think? Or?
I think that's the primary factor because, again, they have a vested interest.
Okay.
Just the fact that they list that they have multiple real estate investments, they have a vested interest in actually increasing unsustainable numbers versus sustainable numbers of immigration, unsustainable numbers of international students.
And we have seen,
where are they going to stay? They're going to stay somewhere, and then we've got over, it's not just housing, it's hospitals are flooded because we have more people and we don't have enough people to deal with them. The schools are flooded because we don't have enough
pressure on the systems.
Schools,
Pete,
right?
thank you so much for the call. I'm just going to jump in because we're going to talk about what is leading to those policy choices, I think is the broader question around that. And there have been, in the last year, changes to the number of international students that have been brought in federally, and immigration numbers as well have been lowered. But Laura, what do you see as the policy changes that are needed when it comes to housing?
Well, housing is complicated. It's really complicated.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing that I have to say is that there's no magic bullet, and housing does tend to be more expensive in those areas. Lots of the callers talked about how beautiful British Columbia is, and so housing does tend to be more expensive in cities and locations where you want to be there. So, but what we can look at is the cost of the new housing coming on stream. And I think there are some issues there to do with development cost charges. These are the charges that municipalities charge to developers. And some of those have gone up at rates that make no sense. We can look at things like how long it takes to get approvals. That makes things more expensive. So when you look at, there's a lot of costs that are kind of invisible that are larded on by government, and I think we need to kind of have a very careful look at that. But the other thing we have to be careful to do is to make sure we're looking at not just the prices in terms of rent or houses or groceries. We need to look at the income. That's the cost side of it. We need to look at the income that people are bringing in, and how do we make sure there are opportunities. And we heard a lot from those 3,000 people who sent in emails and texts and responded to social posts that really things like, my daughter just graduated with a bachelor's degree and she's working at Starbucks and she can't find a job, or I've applied to, over 500 different places. This was another respondent in my field that I'm trained in, and nothing. This was for software engineer. So I think we really have to also connect the dot on that piece of it, that the opportunity, if your wages are keeping pace, everything feels a little easier, right? The price increases at the grocery store, the rent increases. Now, it's more complicated than just that, but that piece of it tends to be left out of the conversation.
Let's take some more calls. I know a lot of you want to comment on this. Helen at Gabriola Island. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts about what might prompt people to leave the province?
So one of the things that I really want to talk about is transportation. And the reason that I want to bring that up is because I live on Gabriola, and obviously I work on Vancouver Island, actually. And one of the things that I'm really noticing is that our transport system is absolutely inadequate. And what that has as a big impact is on all of the things that your guest and other callers have been discussing, which is it has an impact on opportunities for people to access educational opportunities.
Sure.
It has a massive impact on people accessing work opportunities. It has a massive impact on their finances, because running a private vehicle is really expensive nowadays. And I just feel like that part of it is being really missed, because it's no good building housing if people don't have transport to get to the services they need, to get to jobs, to get to universities. Also, having decent transport, decent public transport, would actually help people to be able to access cheaper housing. Because at the minute, what we do is we crush everybody into a small area on Vancouver Island. We're very isolated pockets because there is no transport that's fast enough, reliable enough, or cheap enough to actually get people over longer distances. And what that means is the whole of our province is strangled into small pockets. The Lower Mainland is expanding a bit, but then huge amounts of money are being put into that and nowhere else. I want to just flag up that your guest said about 3,000 people that had been involved in the survey. I would like to say that 23,700 people have actually signed a petition calling for the resurrection of Vancouver Island Rail, which is one railway line up and down Vancouver Island, connecting Victoria, Duncan, Nanaimo, and further on to Courtenay and Comox. All those communities that could be connected, all that business opportunity that could be spread up and down the island, all of that spread out of housing that would lower rents in Victoria, lower rents in city centres, because people would physically be able to live further away from their work and still get there, and away from their colleges, be able to access healthcare more easily because a lot of that is concentrated. So I want to put in a word for Vancouver Island Rail and more investment in that.
You know, you've made your case, Helen, certainly. And that point about, okay, you can build housing, but how are people going to get to those services, to school, to healthcare and hospitals? So thank you very much for that. I know that came up in your report as well. Laura, let's take another call from Rocky in Langley now. What is concerning you the most that might prompt you to leave the province, Rocky?
Well, I'm 73 years old and I'm retired, living on a fixed income, and I live with my daughter, and we pay about $1,750 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom on a mortgage. Okay, my neighbor has a 1-bedroom place, and he pays $2,500 for rent. If I didn't live with my daughter, I couldn't afford to live in Langley.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to move.
Yeah.
I'd have no choice.
Yeah.
Now, would I move out of the province? No. But I'd have to go somewhere where the rent is significantly cheaper. I'd have to find something that's probably right around about $1,500 a month or $1,600, because my limited income wouldn't allow me to do anything else.
What is the impact on your life and on your daughter's life as well as a younger person?
Well, one example is that right now I go to the food bank every single week to help us with the groceries. And if I didn't, it would be much more difficult for us just to get through the month. So that's one of them. And of course, everything else goes along with it. Luckily, I'm healthy and I can walk and, get good exercise. But the reality is that with the money that I have coming in on my pension and what it would cost for me to live in Langley, I couldn't possibly do it.
Yeah. Does your daughter think about leaving?
No, my daughter is disabled, and I have to be here to care for her. And her doctors are closed, so we couldn't leave this part of the province.
So these are things that they're part of you're in a community essentially in Langley, but it is certainly the cost is there for sure. Rocky, thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing from you. One last email here from Gord in Parksville. Where do I start? But taxes is a good one. Why do I need to pay the government $2,400 if I buy my neighbor's $20,000 car? I willingly pay my taxes, but when the province spends with abandon, with little or no concern for value, but ample room for pet projects and overspending, willingness quickly turns to resentment. And as mentioned, one word describes the BC healthcare system: broken. Gordon, thank you very much. Laura Jones, what do you do with your findings then? What is the call or what is the result that you're looking for?
So it may be the end of our campaign, but obviously it's just the beginning of a conversation that's going on throughout the province. And so we have a number of recommendations for governments. Part of them, the last caller talked about taxes. I think having a competitive tax environment is really important to attract and retain businesses here, and then those businesses create opportunities, and those businesses are also generating revenue for government. So a number of callers pointed out areas where we have needs, whether it's transportation or healthcare or being able to support those who are less fortunate. We need a thriving private sector in order to generate the revenue to do that. Right now, we don't have a thriving private sector, and we have record-breaking deficits. Our deficits are bigger than COVID level deficits, and that's projected into the future. So the last caller also talked about government fiscal restraint. I think there needs to be a little bit more of that, carefully done, because obviously our healthcare, education, social programs are really important, but where there are opportunities to make sure we're spending in the right areas, that's important. So tax competitiveness, let's get rid of some red tape that's not helping anybody, and let's make sure we're being fiscally responsible. But the last thing I want to say is I think that I want to say a big thank you to all of the people who engaged in this conversation. I think it's really important that as British Columbians, we see ourselves as having agency in these conversations, because that's how change happens. And so just a big thank you to everyone who participated.
And here on this show as well, certainly it is a topic of conversation, some differing opinions too, though. Anita writes, for the past few decades, real estate developers have been riding roughshod over city planners, and our infrastructure hasn't been able to keep up, allowing businesses to do whatever they want without proper planning for accommodating infrastructure is not the way to keep people in BC. Certainly lots of thoughts on this. I appreciate your starting the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Laura Jones is the CEO of the BC Business Council. It is 12:46 now. You're with BC Today. And we are going to talk more about another British Columbian now who's been honored with an Order of BC. Mark Jacker, the sustainable energy economist and the chair of the BC Utilities Commission. The province is recognizing him for his science leadership, particularly his contributions to global climate action through innovative energy and environmental policy analysis. He spoke to the CBC about how his life's work is grounded in this province.
I was born and raised in British Columbia. I went to do my PhD in energy economics at the University of Grenoble in France. And I thought I would live in Europe for the rest of my life. And then my old alma mater, Simon Fraser University, invited me to come back as a professor. I hadn't even applied initially. And a chance to live with my parents and where my siblings are, as my parents, and they're gone now. And so I am a British Columbian, and I've done a lot of work around the world, a lot in China and Europe and elsewhere, Brazil, but I really am a British Columbian, done a lot of work nationally, but I'm a nonpartisan advisor, expert who has helped out no matter which government we had in British Columbia. They've called on me. And so to win the Order of BC, I am a British Columbian, so it really means a lot.
In other news now, Prime Minister Mark Carney was in the Okanagan today. He was speaking at the Gorman Brothers Lumber Mill in West Kelowna, and he announced new supports for the lumber industry in light of new softwood lumber duties announced by the U.S. last month. Now, the Liberal government is announcing new $700 million in loan guarantees for forestry companies and additional $500 million in grants for product development and market diversification, and to use more Canadian lumber to build housing as well. Here's some of what Prime Minister Mark Carney had to say today.
Over the course of the last 4 decades, the United States has alternated between confrontation and collaboration, frequently applying unfounded, countervailing and anti-dumping duties against Canadian softwood, and then signing formal agreements that benefited businesses, workers, and homeowners on both sides of the border. Let's be clear. Canada does not dump lumber into the United States, and we will continue to make the case that these current and proposed duties are unjustified. Canada is a vital supplier to our southern neighbor. We represent around a quarter of the U.S. market, and we help keep down costs of American homes while improving their quality. But we're in a situation now where the disputes around softwood lumber are part of a bigger picture. American trade pressures have intensified and broadened. And the U.S. is in the process of fundamentally changing all of its trading relationships.
That's the Prime Minister speaking this morning in West Kelowna. Well, for reaction, we've reached Gavin McGarrigle, the Western Regional Director for UNIFOR, which represents some forestry workers, and he also sits on the BC government's Softwood Lumber Advisory Council. Gavin, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What do you think of the $700 million, the $500 million announced for diversification when it comes to the latter? Is that going to be enough?
Well, ultimately, no, it won't be enough because we've got workers who are laid off right now. We've got facilities that need to be expanded, that need more investment, and that's going to take some time. So when you look at the scale of the loan guarantees at $700 million to the $50 million that they've set aside for retraining for workers, we're concerned that there's not going to be enough. Having said that, it's good to see the focus the Prime Minister has put on this. We've been calling for a lot of action, Canadian procurement, using Canadian wood in Canadian industry. All of those things are positive, but we need to have more consultation with unions and industry to make sure that we get the support right, make sure we get it to where the workers need it the most, and make sure, most importantly, we keep people working as we go through this, as the Prime Minister noted, trade war that covers more than forestry. But forestry has been bearing the brunt of it for decades now, and we need a lot more support for working people.
How much of the impact of on forestry and on forestry workers is from and can be directly attributed to the tariffs and countervailing duties?
Well, it creates such a chill on investment overall. I mean, the investment climate right now is just terrible for forestry companies. There's not a lot of certainty out there. There are more investigations that the U.S. are following up on. This isn't the end. And so we need support right now for people who have been laid off. We need to make sure, how are we going to keep these mills operating right now? And of course, as this strategy notes, we do need to pivot and diversify, but that's going to take some time. And this is a major crisis, and it's really come to a head. And these duties are just going to ripple through the industry in such a dire way that people and the communities they live in are going to need direct support.
Right. And so, given that it has been years, right, in the making, and that need for diversification in forestry as well, what difference could federal policies actually make? Are there deeper, more underlying issues that need to be addressed?
Well, there are, but right now we need to stabilize the situation. We're having the offer of loan guarantees that needs to be tied to job guarantees and community guarantees, and making sure that the money's going to keep the industry where it is and to provide some money for investment and keep people working. It's no good to talk about training people for the jobs of the future if they don't have a job today. And that's what people in these sectors and industries are looking at, making sure that they get a guarantee that their facility is going to be stable through the next year, 2 or 3, while we diversify, while we get those training skills up and those dollars rolled out. But people are going to need jobs and paychecks from now until then.
Do you have a sense of how many people are laid off right now?
Well, the government's release announces there's over 6,000 softwood lumber workers that are affected, and these are predominantly spread out throughout British Columbia. It's also a nationwide crisis as well. We have concerns in Quebec and on the Atlantic and everywhere, and so there's lots of workers affected. There's lots of spin-off jobs affected, and it's magnified even more because a lot of it is in these small towns where really these forestry companies and related businesses are the only game in town, and so the impact is felt very wide, very quickly.
It's interesting. We were just talking about British Columbians leaving the province, and part of that is the economy. And I'm wondering whether that's something that's been on the minds of forestry workers.
Well, 100%. I mean, you can't be talking about transitioning people out of a job and then paying them $20 an hour less or leaving their community. Forestry workers in Prince George need to know, are the major employers going to be there? Are they going to get through this crisis? And if not, what exact help is going to be given to make sure they do? Same thing in Kamloops, same thing on Vancouver Island. That's the kind of direct numbers and support that forestry workers are looking for. We do support, of course, the grand changes. This is an industrial strategy the Prime Minister announced today. We've been calling for an industrial policy, which is a lot more robust. And of course, that has to cut across many sectors because we're in a trade war, whether we like it or not.
So what would you like to see immediately then?
Well, I think there needs to be more consultation with unions and companies. We haven't seen that in this policy. This has really come out of the blue. The province here is doing a good job with the Softwood Lumber Advisory Council. But again, forestry workers that I'm talking to, other unions, they're calling for more specifics, more direct guarantees to people, and making sure that they're not going to see government dollars just going out the door with no commitments to jobs or the communities that they're based in.
What about the market itself when it comes to the demand for building? We have builders groups apparently reported by the Globe and Mail who have written to the Prime Minister and the Premier and the Housing Minister to say we may need, or we do need, to ease the limits on foreign investment in order to bolster the housing market and create that demand and get people working again. I mean, what do you think of the market factors that are playing in this?
Well, I think overall, we've had briefings through government and that the market overall for investment right now is uncertainty, and businesses need uncertainty. And a lot of these mills and communities require significant investment, and that's where government has to play a role. It can't just be the sort of solutions that industry always puts forward where give us a free hand and we'll take care of jobs. They didn't take care of jobs when they made a lot of money during COVID, and we can't trust them to take care of jobs now. That's the government's role, both federally and provincially. He called it a pillar of Canada's economy. It is a pillar, not only of Canada's economy, but of BC's economy. And we need to make sure that we keep people working, create that demand, create that substitute, and also use all the tools in the toolbox that we can to push back against this trade war affecting forestry now for decades, but affecting so many critical industries now. Prime Minister Carney was right during the election when he said that President Trump wants to break us so he can own us. And right now he's in the midst of breaking the forestry industry, and we need to see a lot more support.
So you'd like to see more direct support for workers?
That's right. I mean, if you're working in major facilities in major towns, it's not too hard to speculate, is my facility going to be working? Well, if that company signs a loan guarantee with the government for some investment, it keeps people working, there's some apprenticeship, there's some dollars going, there's some new products, new diversification going. That's the kind of thing people need to see to keep the facilities going right now, because this isn't going to be resolved anytime soon, and the next year or two look particularly dire for forestry workers.
Gavin, good to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Gavin McGarrigle is the Western Regional Director for UNIFOR, which represents more than 22,000 forestry workers across Canada. He also sits on the BC government's Softwood Lumber Advisory Council. Lots of emails coming in on leaving BC. We'll get to more of them for you tomorrow on the show.